Hello, welcome back to my channel. This is the Mental Wellness channel with Waihiga. If you're new here, I hope that you stick around to take a listen to what I have to share. I want you guys to take a look at this video and then we'll talk.
If you've been on TikTok for a while, you must have heard about a ton of Africans telling you that Europeans stole Africa's resources. Now, there's a lot to say about that. First and foremost, most of these resources are still in Africa. And they're not being stolen by Europeans. They're actually being sold to Europeans by the African state leadership. Your own elites are robbing you. It's not us doing it. Not anymore. The real issue, of course, is why aren't Africans using their own resources to do things? Why does Mr. Beast have to go to Kenya to build water wells? Why didn't the Kenyan government do it themselves? I suppose the Kenyan government could have done it themselves. They just chose not to do it. Nigeria is now a country of almost 220 million people, the largest country in Africa. But they only produce about 10% of the electricity that a small country like Hungary. Hungary only has 10 million people, but they produce 10 times as much electricity as Nigeria does. I mean, I know you want to have your Wakanda, right? But do you expect white people to give it to you? No, you're supposed to build it yourself. Having said all this, it is of course obvious that we Europeans in the north need to prepare for a possible, potential African rise in terms of technology and therefore also in terms of military capacity. And that means we in Europe need to already start looking ahead and thinking ahead about how we are going to win the war against Africa, because there will be a future war between Europe and Africa.
Today's topic is how African leaders are complete sellouts. And I tend to agree with what the man said in the video. Our African leaders completely sell us out. Our elites sell us out. I'm Kenyan and I live in Kenya. And why did it have to take Mr. Beast to come from the Americas to build us wells in Kenya when our government can probably very easily do that? The conversation about corruption, the conversation about our African leaders looting and taking public funds is a serious conversation. And it's one that I think millennials and the youth, in Africa, youth means a group of 18 to 45, around 35, 45 years old. It's a huge group that the youth now need to engage in. We're not our parents. We're obviously tired of this behavior. We have to call our African leaders to account. We don't have the quick fixes that our parents or people before us had, which was you study hard, you go abroad. That's what the solution was for everyone. Or people who came from families of means. Education is the key. You study hard, you get a scholarship, you go to the US, you go to the UK, you go to Australia, and you live your best life, and you only come home or you send money home to build up country or in the village. A lot of us cannot do that today. A lot of us are sitting at home with degrees, with bachelor degrees, with master's degrees, because there are no jobs. This is the current situation in Kenya right now. A lot of us, I graduated in 2020, and even though YouTube is my job and I love to do this job, this is what I wake up, I do, I love it. It's still not monetized. However, I still am working on it, and this is something that I love to do. A lot of people, a lot of graduates are sitting at home because the turnover rate is so high. Every year, graduating students are so many, and yet there are no jobs that our so-called governments have to offer. The job industry is so saturated. There's so much going on, and it's like these graduates have nowhere to go. So what ends up happening is that the elites of this country, the elites in most countries in Africa, end up hoarding the resources that we have. I don't think the West would survive without Africa. I think this is a very known fact. We're the most resourceful continent in the world. We have the most resources. And it's sad to think that the countries with the most natural resources are constantly in civil war. And that's because allegedly the West pays for wars to continue in these countries so that resources may be stolen right under their noses. When the world is focusing on the war that's happening in Congo, people are stealing, people are looting. Western countries are stealing natural resources like rubber and stuff like that. Cobalt, that thing that is used to make cell phones, smartphones, because 80% or some ridiculous number like that comes from Congo. So when you think of why countries like Sierra Leone, Sudan, Congo are constantly at war, you have to ask yourself, who are the agents that go into these countries and make that war happen? These wars are being funded by the West in order to steal the resources from Africa, from the richest countries, Congo being one of the richest countries in natural resources. So it's sad that our leaders sell us out, and they continue to sell us out. And this is not something new. Back in slavery, when the Westerners ended up on the shores of Africa, who was going and kidnapping their own people? Who was doing that, and who was trading them off to the Westerners, who did not care where their own tribesmen went? It was the own African chief. African chiefs sold out their own people and gave African slaves up to Westerners. That is how slavery also occurred and happened in Africa. So to think of this idea that, white people or Westerners, Europeans just came to Africa and stole black people and sold them into slavery is not an accurate story of how things happened. There were very rich African chiefs that saw people in the community and sold them off to these Europeans and Westerners for spices and traded them for all sorts of things. So we have a history, and a long history, of our African leaders selling us off. Can you blame the Europeans if they're benefiting from it? If they're getting our resources at a very low and cheap price, can you really blame them? I personally, I can't. The issue has always been Africans for Africa. The elite versus the masses. It has always been a class issue. It has always been the difference between the haves and the have, and the ones who have a very little compared to the ones who don't have. And that is an issue in Africa that we really need to address. When I used to live in South Africa, I thought that, this was utopia in Africa. Fast forward 10 years after moving away from South Africa is literally collapsing in front of our eyes, and it's really not a funny sight. South Africa used to be the gem. We used to consider it, other African countries used to consider it a first world country in Africa. But now it has collapsed, and it is collapsing. And it's due to the same very things as the rest of African governments. It is government. It is governance. It is the same corruption. It is looting of public funds. It is the haves looting and taking from the have-nots. It is government lying to the masses and lying to people that they're doing their job when they're actually not doing anything but stealing, and stealing massively, so that things are not running anymore. And so South Africa is right on time and right on track with where African nations have been. When Kenya gained its independence in 1963 from colonial Britain, we thought this would be an amazing chapter. Black people can lead other black people, Africans leading Africans. And it is a disaster. It is a complete disaster. There's no order. There's no accountability. Things do not get done. And people outright just steal. Our government, there is no democracy in Africa. When I learned about democracy, totalitarian kind of governance, and the differences, and socialism, I honestly don't see what's so bad about socialism. If we can get everybody to the same level, if my money can help the next person. Because capitalism has really ruined Africans. Capitalism does not work in Africa. Capitalism works where there is a democracy. Capitalism works where there is a very strict democracy, where there's emphasis on strict regulation and rules of law. And if you've ever been to Africa, if you've seen how any African country runs, you would see that the law is not something that is really upheld. So people in this game in Africa, the game is rigged. It depends which family you were born into. It depends on which silver spoon you were born into. That is what is going to get you through life in Africa. the family that you were born into, if they have money, and how far it's going to take you. If you're born into the wrong family, as most Africans are, the have-nots, God be with you. Because our leaders are certainly not going to look out for you. So I wonder what we are going to do as this generation. I'm certainly one of those people who can't jump ship. I can't leave Africa. I can't leave Kenya if I wanted to, like, just run away, go start my life in the West and forget about home. Like, I can't do that. And even if I wanted to, I'm starting to realize that East-West home is best. Even if I had the resources and the money to move and to go live my life, spend my dollars in the US, spend my dollars or pounds in the UK, or Australian dollars in Australia, why would I want to buy property in Australia? Why would I want to buy property in the US? Why would I want to buy property in the UK? I'd want to buy property right here in Kenya. I would want my children to go to school here in Kenya, to good schools in Kenya. I want my country to be good enough for my kids. I don't want to have to go abroad to do it. I want to invest in my country because it's a beautiful country at the end of the day. Beautiful country. The problem is maintenance and how it is being run, like every other African country. What are your suggestions? What should we do as Africans? What should this generation do? We recently had the elections. It's just been 1 year of having this president in office, and I hate to tell you so, but it looks really bad. It looks really bad. What should we do as a people? Because as a Kenyan, why would I want to start a business overseas? I want my business to be Kenyan, in Kenya. There are just so many benefits to doing things at home rather than abroad. What I'm seeing is that as Kenyans, we can't run away. We can't run away anymore. We can't run away and look for greener pastures in Canada, in Europe. We can't do that anymore. The ones who are staying behind in Kenya, what are we going to do about this government and the future governments to come? Because this is the land that we are going to inherit. This is the government we are going to inherit. And the systems are already not working. What are we going to do? Let me know your thoughts down below. Subscribe to my channel. Let me know what you think about it. About this video, I thought it was so funny how African leaders pander so much to Western leaders.
Morning, Prime Minister. What's it like to be escorted in by motorcade?
I didn't actually notice.
Aujourd'hui aussi, c'est un autre jour. Là. Le monde part en couille. Non. J'ai du mal à imaginer ça.
And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Until next time, bye bye.